thanks everybody for showing up tonight and being here. I'm Fred Kaler. I started this company, Ready Chapter 1, and been working as a writer in the publishing industry and an illustrator for, about 10 years now. So let's dive in. Let's see. All right, this is 3 publishing secrets that pro writers use to sell their next book. This is all stuff that I wish I'd known when I was getting started, and when I got started was like 20 years ago. So if somebody had sat me down and told me these things that we're going to go over tonight, it probably would have, taken a solid, 6-8 years out of the time it took me to get started working in the publishing industry. So hopefully this is going to be super useful for you, whether you are currently writing a lot and already working to get published, or if you are brand new and just kind of learning how stuff works. So again, this is me. I'm Fred Kaler. I'm one of the lucky ones. I did break into the publishing industry. I got my start in children's books as a writer and an illustrator, and moved up to novels. But the stuff we're going to go over tonight, it is for every genre, for whether you write for adults, whether you write for kids. As part of Ready Chapter 1, I'm talking to publishers and editors and agents daily that are in all those different categories. I just happen to get started in the kids industry, and that's where I love to hang out in the kids industry, because that's cool stuff. Like I said, I've been fortunate enough to have multiple books that I've gotten to work on and won some cool awards and had a lot of fun. So quick agenda tonight. We'll go over this. So we're going to talk about today's publishing industry. This is a little bit of publishing 101 kind of stuff. If you are, again, advanced, if you're already, out on submissions and things like that, then, that part might not be relevant to you, but we're going to go through it quickly just because I know that there are some brand new folks in the room. We're going to talk about the paths, to breaking in today. We're going to talk about what viable options are out there for writers. And then the meat of our program tonight is about really kind of breaking the rejection cycle. So what does it take to break in? We've got our 3 secrets, and I was supposed to make these vague so they'd make you curious. So I'm curious if you got curious about the H&H multiplier and the better bitter pill and how to hook a gatekeeper. So those are our 3 secrets that we're going to dive into. And then I will, full disclosure, there is an offer at the end of this. We are, the Ready Chapter 1 has stuff that we sell in the Masterclass series, but that is not what this is about. This is about spending 98% of our time, giving you things that are valuable, that can help you in your career. And, if at the end there's stuff that you want to continue with us, awesome. I'm going to present that at the very, very end. So let's get started. Okay, you are definitely in the right place. If you want to learn how the publishing industry works, if you want to learn how career authors continue to get published, how we kind of approach, our next book, the next thing we're going to write, and how we're going to pitch it and how we're going to get it into the hands of the right editor. And if you're looking for steps that you can take to position your story, the one you're working on today, for sale in the publishing industry, that you're in the right place. You're in the wrong place if you're already a best-selling author. So I think I saw Stephen King on our list. Stephen, you don't need to be here. The Pimp My Yacht, webinar is on the next website. That was a bad joke. Sorry for that. But so if you're already working in the industry, then this might, you're going to get less value out of this than everybody else. And if you're hoping for a silver bullet, I think you'll be disappointed as well. So if you're, like, oh, there's just like one super duper easy way to get myself published, there isn't. Or at least I haven't discovered it yet. So I won't be revealing one. Yeah, but that's our agenda. And, I'm going to start with a couple of the cool things that have happened to me because of my career in publishing. So these are the memories that are going to stick with me forever and ever and ever throughout my whole life. Over there on the far left, that was like when my debut novel came out at, a big trade show in New York City, and I got to go and be there for it. And there's this giant stand with the picture of it. I have gotten to, publishing has let me travel the whole world, really. I've gotten to go all over to do research for the stories that I write. And that's been, amazing. And one of the joys of my life is to travel. I got to take my daughter to an awards show. One of the books I worked on won a Boston Globe Hornbook honor, which was, really super duper awesome and cool and amazing. And just, to get to be that cool dad who gets to take their kid to an awards show in the city. I mean, that was one of the joys of my life. And then just making cool stuff. So when my when I signed with a new agent, we did a photo shoot and got to make cool posters and just the fun, silly stuff, because publishing is it's entertainment. A lot of what we do is to entertain others. And if you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong. So those are the cool things that have gotten to happen to me. But I wanted to show you this slide specifically because it wasn't always that way. So this is very young me. This is in my 20s at my very first writing conference. And what I wanted to show was not necessarily me, but I wanted you to look at the receipt next to that. So I found this receipt. This was from the hotel that I booked for my very first trip to New York City, and I paid $31 a night to stay in Manhattan. And this was in like a mixed bed youth hostel because it was all I could afford. I was like dirt poor, like just I had nothing. So I had like $31 a night to stay in the city. And maybe I think I had $15 a day was my food budget. So I literally had a bagel every morning and dollar slices of pizza every single night when I went to my first conference in New York City. And it's fun to look back and see that, I started here. I didn't know anybody. I had no connections, and I was able to get to a place, where I'm regularly getting publishing deals and getting to work in the industry. So if I can do it, and I'm just, I'm a guy from nowhere. If I can do it, then you can as well. And that's kind of that's the point of that slide. So let's jump into our quick kind of publishing 101. I kind of break publishers up into about 3 different categories, and the first one is the type of publisher that you are accustomed to, thinking of. So these are the ones in the skyscrapers in New York, and these are, in California and Boston. So these are the big, they're basically businesses. They are businesses whose job is to create, produce, and distribute and market books. The way a traditional publisher works, they license the story from you, so they never own it. If you open up any book and you flip it open, look at the copyright is copyright your name, not the publisher's name, because you still own your work. You are just in exchange for money licensing it to this publisher to turn it into a book. If that publisher writes you a check in exchange for your book, then it's considered a traditional publisher. They've got the professional editors, the art directors, the publicists, the distribution channels to get you into into the bookstores. All that sort of stuff happens through a traditional publisher. And it's also, kind of like the hardest one to get into of all the publishing options that are out there. The next one up is what we call hybrid publishers. And these are kind of like new. This is a newish, maybe in the last, 10, 15 years, something like that. These hybrid publishers have come along. They have a lot of the same resources as a traditional publisher. So they might have, art directors, they might have book designers, they might have editors. But the main difference is that instead of them writing you a check for the book, they call it partnering. They ask you to financially partner with them to produce the book. So instead of them writing you a check, you're writing them a check. And I've never personally worked with a hybrid publisher just because, I've always been the one who needs the check. So I've always, tried to work more with the traditional publishers. But I have seen good stuff, really, really nice, well-polished, beautiful books come out of these hybrid publishers. The one downside that I don't necessarily like about them is there's no real promise typically of distribution or, placement in a bookstore or anything like that. And it might be best, for writers who kind of either already have an existing platform, or if this is like the one book. Like if you're like, I've got one book in me and I want to make it good, then, maybe a hybrid publisher could be the right path. And then lastly, we have indie publishing, which used to be called vanity publishing or self-publishing. It's grown. Like indie publishing has exploded, and there's a lot of opportunities out there for you to be able to make the book exactly the way you want to make it. You do pay for everything, so you're hiring every individual helper who would design your book cover, who would get it onto Amazon Kindle, all those sorts of things. So that's all on you. And what I want to add to this is that I've got tons of friends who are writers. Many of them are traditionally published, but a lot of my traditionally published writers also indie publish. So it's like, they had this one manuscript that nobody wanted. None of the publishers wanted it, but why not put it into, why not put it into Kindle Vella, or why not put it on, KDP or Ingram Spark or something like that? And so they're supplementing their income by, getting the traditional book deals when they can, and then indie publishing the other stuff and still making a few $1,000s off of these books that they're indie publishing. So it's kind of like, it's definitely become more accessible and less of a stigma. So, hey, guess what? It's a great time for publishing. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. In 2003, there were about 2 million books published. This is all from a research project called Words Rated. And then in 2023, they estimate like about 4 million books. So you got to think, if there's twice as many books, there's twice as much opportunity. There's twice as many spots for a new writer to break in, and all of that is true. So the digital and on-demand stuff makes publishing more accessible. And I was literally just yesterday having a conversation with an editor, and he's super excited about these non-traditional storytelling media he's like, they're just blowing up. And these are like, serialized fiction podcasts and things like that. So it's like, when you think about being a writer, it's not necessarily that it has to be, just the only thing I can do is make this book that goes to this one publisher and ends up in a bookstore shelf. There's just so many more ways to get a story out there into the world today. And that's exciting. Now, we said it's a great time for publishing, but it's also a tough time for publishing. So it's the best of times and the worst of times. That same project that researched the number of books, they found that, agents were saying they were getting 2,000 submissions a year in 2003. And those same agents are getting 10,000 submissions a year in 2023. So the sad news is that it's getting, it can be harder to get in because there's so many people trying to break in today. And really the kind of the ripple effect of that is that you're not going to hear back from most editors and agents unless they're interested in your story. And that can be really hard because, you might send out your book to, 50, 60, 70 agents by the time, it's all said and done. And if you're only getting feedback from one or two of them, it can be challenging to know what's wrong with it or how to fix it or, anything like that. So that's a challenging part of the industry today. And a lot of the growth is in the self-publishing. So in those self-publishing markets. So again, that's the DIY kind of stuff where you've got to be your own designer. You've got to be savvy with social media. And so, the growth is there and that's good. There's new opportunities. But there's also some challenges in the industry. So it is tough. And that creates what I call the publishing rejection cycle. This is the first thing I ever designed for Ready Chapter 1. And I made this for a friend of mine who was trying to he was asking me why he was having such a hard time getting in front of editors and agents. And I was like, well, dude, here's exactly why. And it's really the process that you're following. So, you're creating in a vacuum. So you're not participating in any sort of community. If you get feedback on your work, you're sending it to your friends and family. And then they're giving you their feedback, but they've got their mom goggles on. So it's like, they don't want to hurt your feelings. So they're going to tell you it's the best thing they've ever read. And then when you do send it out, you're sending it out to publishers that you've never interacted with once ever before in your life. And nothing happens and you don't hear back. And that cycle just repeats itself because if you don't get any sort of good feedback, well, then your choice is to either, give up or start over. So when Ready Chapter 1, was an idea in my head, I was like, this is what I'm going to break. I'm going to design something that just obliterates this rejection cycle. So that's what we're out to do. And I don't make a ton of promises. But the one thing that I have consistently told writers in every workshop that I give is that there's a story inside you that a traditional publisher is willing to buy. And people don't necessarily believe me, but I can, I will take you through the process. I will prove it to you. It just you have to write it brilliantly, and you have to tell the right story. You have to write it brilliantly, and you have to learn how to pitch. And if you can do that, then you can choose any publishing path you want. And why wouldn't you choose a traditional publisher? So that's kind of, that's where we're at right now. So if a traditional publisher gives you an offer and you hate it, well, then you could go to a hybrid, you could go to indie, whatever. But I want to talk tonight about how to get to those traditional publishers, because again, if you can get to there, then you can get anywhere else. So here we are. This is the meat of the presentation, the 3 publishing secrets I wish I'd known before spending 10 years stuck in the rejection cycle. By the way, I spent 10 years stuck in the rejection cycle. That's how long it took me from when I was like, I want to work in this industry to I got my first book deal. And if I'd known these things that we're going to talk about tonight, like I said, I don't think it would have taken nearly as long. So the first secret, whatever, I'm calling it the H multiplier. If you've guessed it already, then put it into the chat. The H&H multiplier is the head and the heart. So the story that's going to get you published lives at the intersection of your head and your heart. And I want to give you an illustration of this. So this is a book that I sent out on submission. So this is one of my stories. Not many people have seen this. It's called The Unsinkable. And the log line, I'm going to have to get close to the screen, so pardon my giant nose here. The log line says, with no hope of rescue, a fisherman's son lost in the Atlantic must teach himself to survive. Now, why is that a head and heart book? Well, a lot of books have been written about ocean adventures. A lot of books have been written, about, kids lost at sea, that sort of thing. It's got a little bit of a Life of Pi, a little bit of Old Man in the Sea. But what makes this book special is that I am personally a 3rd-generation fisherman. So my granddad was a commercial crabber. That's how he fed the family. My dad was a fisherman. He took us out on the ocean all the time. So I basically, I grew up having adventures on the ocean, and I've had a whole bunch of my own. And so I have sensory details that nobody else has about the ocean, or that not a lot of other people have about the ocean. So, the sound of the wind across, fishing line, or how cold it feels when you get almost hypothermic because you have sunk a boat and now you're clinging to the capsized vessel. I've been there. I've done that. Those sensory details give me they let me write the story in a way that nobody else can. And so that's the head part, because I know how to, my fishing knots, I know how to tie the knots. I know what to do if you can't find bait. Like, I know all of these things about fishing, so I can write accurately about them. But this is a heart story for me, because the ocean is what fed my family, for 2 generations. And so anytime I write about the ocean, I have this feeling of home in my chest when I write about the ocean, when I research it, when I see pollution, all of those things make these kind of stories matter to me so much. And so when I write an ocean story, it's going to knock your freaking socks off, because it matters to me on all of those multiple levels. And those are the kind of stories that you need to find. And so I'm going to tell you real quick Penny's story. And Penny might even be in the room tonight, so I hope she is. But Penny was at a recent writing workshop that I gave, and we were going through this head and heart stuff. And I asked a leading question. I was like, well, what was your job growing up? And Penny was the first one to raise her hand. She said, oh, my job growing up was to steal the wood. And I'm like, steal the wood? What do you mean, Penny? And she goes on to tell us how she and her brother grew up on the outskirts of this wooded area in I think it was Georgia. And they built forts in the woods, and they just loved this wood. And then development came in and started encroaching and, tearing down the wood. Well, what she and her brother did was went to every single construction site, and they stole stuff from the construction sites. Now, I think it was to build their forts, but in my mind, I'm like, yeah, but that would also slow down the construction and save your woods and da-da-da-da-da. And so we're riffing on this idea, and I'm like, Penny, why aren't you writing that story? Because it's the intersection of what mattered to you and what matters to you today, and what deeply, details about these woods that nobody else would know. And so it was almost a year later, she texted me and she's like, hey, Fred, I am almost done writing that story. And I'm so excited that Penny decided to write that story, because again, this is a story that nobody else can tell. Her why is so evident in it. And so I think she's got a better chance of being successful with that story than just about, anything else, especially something that doesn't meet at that intersection. So Penny, if you're there tonight, I'm super duper excited for you, and I hope that you keep going with that story. Okay, and then you might ask yourself, well, what if I don't write contemporary, or what if I'm like sci-fi or Western, or whatever, you write some other genre. It doesn't matter. So here's the thing. Oh, hey, Penny says she's here. So here's the thing. What's important about your story is that it matters to you. What's important is that the sensory details come from lived experiences, and that the theme of the story. So even if you're writing a Western, or you're writing or you're writing a romance, like, the theme of the story can still be something that resonates with you on a deep level. And if so whatever story it is you're writing, make sure that the characters are going through things that meet that intersection of your heart and your head, and your story is going to be so much more successful if you can do that. So here are some of those leading questions, again, about finding the right story in your head versus your heart. So what are your areas of expertise? Like, what were you trained to do as a job? Those are things that you're going to have a lot of deep knowledge about. What subjects are easy for you to talk about? You want to go like 1990s cartoons, Saturday morning cartoons. I've got a lot of opinions there, especially about which, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle was the best. So like, I'm happy to talk about that kind of stuff. So for me, that's a deep area of understanding. There's Penny's question. What were your roles in your family growing up? What about your culture or your heritage is interesting or unexpected? For, my last name is Germanic, and I learned, that Curler means one who shovels coal. And I mean, that's something I've always wanted to explore. Where does that come from? Like, who were the original curlers in Germany? So, those kinds of things can create great fodder for story. And then what chores or activities do you do so often that they're just second nature? And this can be hobbies. This can be, if you love to bowl, if you love to, whatever it is that you do, often you're going to have a lot of great sensory details. And then we follow that up with which stories are in your heart. And this is where it can hurt a little bit, and it needs to. If you're not digging deep, then you're writing a shallow story. So, what struggles or obstacles have you overcome as a human being? What recurring themes just tend to come up over and over again in your life? What experiences have you had that have had a deep impact? What people have had a deep impact, good or bad? So what people have, given you more and built you up in ways that nobody else could, and what people have torn you down. Like, when you put pieces of those personalities into your characters, you're going to write characters in a completely different way. And this is one of my favorite ones too, is like, hey, what dreams or aspirations do you have for yourself? I put this one here because it's like the awesomest excuse ever to go out and do anything that you really want to do. This is your permission to chase any dream that you have. So me, I always wanted to be a treasure hunter. And so I started writing about kids who were looking for buried treasure. And lo and behold, guess what? I had to do a ton of research, and I had to buy a metal detector, and I had to research the Spanish treasure fleet that sank off the coast of Florida in the 1700s. And then I'm out there where the fleet sank, and I'm searching for treasure with my metal detector. Anybody asked me what it was I was doing? Honestly, I'm having the time of my life. But what I told him was, oh, I'm just doing research for a book. So that is one of my favorite things about being a writer, is that you can basically do anything you want to do because it's something you're interested in and you're curious about it. So be super curious and go out and explore and find cool stuff to do and write about. Okay, so those questions that I just gave you are in this PDF. Now, I'm brand new to this software, so sorry about this if this doesn't work right away. I think I'm hitting share. So can everybody see? There should be a PDF called Roadmap. All those questions are in there. There's a whole bunch more like good general getting started in the publishing industry stuff. Can somebody type and say that they can see the PDF? No, yes. Okay. If you can't see the PDF, okay, it's available, it's downloadable. Cool. All right. So all those questions and some other worksheets for you are right there And it's also got like our author goal sheet on it. So that can help you understand, just like help you identify what your goals are for a writer. So take that, have fun with that. And we're going to go on to secret number 2, which is the better bitter pill. And so the better bitter pill, there is a bitter pill in publishing if you want to be a writer. And guys, I'm seeing some questions in here, and we're going to save these for the end because I do want to make sure that we get to everything. So there will be time for Q&A. Just hold on to the questions for me. But yeah, there's a bitter pill in writing, and this is the thing that most writers don't want to do. And this is the reason that so many writers struggle. And I'm going to give you a story. So this is brand new writer Fred versus current day writer Fred. So the original, the OG Fred, and today we shared a lot of writing strengths. So I was just naturally gifted. These were my natural writing strengths. So story ideation, and that's that kind of head and heart stuff. Like it was always easy for me to pick up where the head meets the heart. The narrative voice, like that always came naturally and easy to me. Character development came easy. Dialogue came easy. So those were the things that I was kind of born with. And everybody in this room has, some natural writing strengths, and it just wasn't enough. So even though I had those natural strengths, I still wasn't getting published. I was still struggling, to get editors to even look at my work. And so I swallowed the bitter pill called learning. And it's storycraft. That's the thing that most people don't want to do. They don't want to commit to the learning that it takes to kind of like to build up those gaps, or to bridge those gaps in your author toolkit. But I did. So I knew that I had these strengths, but I also realized here's why I'm not getting published. It's because I'm not good at plotting. I'm not good at scene structure. I'm not good at pacing and tension. And what are these crazy emotional story arcs? All I do is explosions and cool, awesome popcorn flick physical story arcs. I don't do emotional story arcs. I finally identified okay, these are probably the things that are holding me back. And I decided to focus on plotting and scene structure. So I was like, yeah, if I can start here and learn these tools, then I'm going to be in a much better place. And this is a quick aside. So when you do go out to look for, writing craft, when you decide that it's time, you want to find accomplished writers who love to teach. You want to find people who are experts at that specific element of writing craft, whatever it is that you feel like you need help in. You want to find somebody who's really, really good at that. And ideally, you want to find tools that you can use, over and over as you're going. So this is not the class that I took, but this is actually what Ready Chapter 1 developed. And so Janice Hardy from Fiction University, a lot of us are friends with Janice. So she helped me develop an entire soup to nuts curriculum for Ready Chapter 1. And I'm going to just take you over there real quick, because I want you to see how deep the story craft plotting thing goes. What we've done at Ready Chapter 1 is we've built these kind of lessons that start with introductory videos for everything. We've got these really deep dive curriculum things, but what's most important is we've kind of broken everything into DIY worksheets. So if you're trying, this is part 3 of this particular module. So if you're trying to learn how to create a plot arc, we've got great worksheets that are going to help you to create your plot arc, to brainstorm your conflict types, all this sort of stuff. And then even down here at the bottom, if you're ever needing help with any of these worksheets that you can download, we made videos that talk you through how to fill out every different type of worksheet. So here we go from story arcs to plot arcs to character arcs, and then even how you put all of that together. So this was really Janice and I's, love letter to craft, was developing this entire series of modules. So let me jump back over here to the slide deck. Let's see. And so for me, let's see, click start. There we go. Yeah. So for me, I needed to learn plotting. I needed to learn pacing. I needed to learn scene structure. So I bridged all of those gaps in my story sort of author toolkit. And lo and behold, It was literally 2 months later, I sold Garbage Island and the sequel in a 2-book deal to Boyd's Mills Press, which is a medium-sized U.S. publisher. They gave me the red carpet treatment and all that fun stuff. But that was what was missing. So I identified the missing pieces in my toolkit. I learned how to bridge them. I learned how to apply that learning to my story. And that's what made me successful ultimately in getting started in the industry. So that was secret number 2, is that bitter pill of education and learning that we're all going to have to do at some point, sadly. Secret number 3 is literally just about the right hooks for these gatekeepers. And I'm going to step back to Publishing 101 for just a second, because I know that some of us are wondering what's the difference between what are the different types of gatekeepers. And it's basically, we talk about agents and editors. So an agent and an editor, you approach them both the same way, but they are very different. They're very different types of people. So the agent works for you. The editor works for the publisher. Both agents and editors tell you what to do. But the agent's job is to know all of the editors. So an agent's job is literally to take your manuscript and know the right editor who might be interested in publishing that manuscript for you. That editor's job, I feel worse for the editors than for anybody else, because that editor's job is to stand in the gap between this big corporate machine that's trying to make money and these awesome writers whose vision is just to make the world a better place through story. So, that editor has to fill out a profit and loss analysis for every project that they want to acquire. They have to go through all this paperwork, and that all happens behind the scenes. They don't want you to know about that. They just want to know that they believe in you. They want you to know they believe in your story and they're excited to publish it. And that's also where, that agent comes in, because the agent's going to find the right editor with the right personality and the right publishing house that can help take your story to market. So you get to both the agent and the editor through a very similar process. It's called querying, and you can query agents and you can query editors. Most of the bigger publishing houses are closed to unsolicited manuscripts, which means they want you to query through an agent. So basically, you got to do it twice. You got to land an agent, and then the agent's got to land you the editor. And that's kind of how that process plays out. But those editors and those agents are plagued by that same stupid cycle, the rejection cycle, where, they're inundated with submissions, and they just you aren't going to hear back from them. And if you don't hear back, this is what I always struggled with. If you don't hear back from that agent, from that editor, then how do you know how to fix it? How do you know how to make your story better? I talk about an opposite cycle that's opposite to this rejection cycle, and we call it pitch, polish, repeat. So for myself and for many of my writing friends, this is how we make sure that we're continuing to stay publishing. So it's failing fast with our story ideas, but it's constantly pitching, taking the feedback, polishing, and then just repeating that process until we know it's ready. Because if you could know that your story was 100% ready for submission, then you would have so much more confidence. You would put it out there into the world, and you wouldn't wait, wonder, and worry. You would know that it's going to find a home. So pitching, in my definition, that this word is used to cover a litany of different scenarios in publishing. But for me, pitching is any time that you get the opportunity to talk about or have someone read or have someone look at your story that is not a formal submission, not a formal query. So any informal opportunity, that can mean you entered it into a contest, that can mean you gave it to your critique group, that can mean you met an editor on the elevator at a conference and they asked you what you were working on and you gave them your elevator pitch. So anytime that you have to talk about your story or to have somebody else read it, that's what I would call a pitch. And the only thing that matters with the pitch is the feedback. So we polish based on the feedback. And typically, because every writer I know has a healthy ego, when we get positive feedback, we just want to kind of bask in it. But that's really the wrong thing to do with that positive feedback. The best thing to do with your feedback is to analyze the negative feedback. So if they gave you 10 great, amazing things about your story and they identified one negative thing about your story, well, that's your story problem. That's the thing that's holding your story back from being ready to be, submitted and published. And this is a really interesting thing that we've learned over the years, is that anytime somebody tells you what's not working in your story, they're usually right. So they might say, hey, this character felt flat. I didn't understand where the plot was going. Any number of things, like the voice just didn't connect with me. Anytime you get that kind of feedback, it's usually right. But anytime somebody tells you how to fix it, they're usually wrong. And that's because it's your job. It's your story. And so it's literally like somebody has said, hey, here are the holes in your bucket. And you, as the brilliant writer that you are, you have to figure out how to fix those holes. You need to come up with your own solutions. So if they try to tell you how to fix it, thank them, but then come up with your own solutions. And then you just repeat this process over and over again so for me, it's until I've got a pitch that just it's just perfect. And anytime somebody hears my pitch, they're like, yep, that's awesome. That's going to be a great story. And for me, also, the other thing is my first probably 5 chapters. So I want the very first 5 chapters of my story to be polished to a shine, like showroom finish, so that it's just like whoever reads those first 5 chapters, they're just going to, all I want them to say is this person knows how to write. And so I spend way more time polishing those first 5 chapters. And that's my hook. That's how I hook that editor, is they get 5 chapters deep and they're like, oh, I got to know where this is going. I got to know what happens next. The rest of the story, I'm willing to let an editor read it if the other 30 chapters are, A+, maybe not A++. Like I want my first 5 to be A++, like 99.9% of the way there. And then after that, I'm able to let the editor kind of, contribute and comment on it. So I'm always looking for that. I'm always looking for the negative, and I'm using that negative to fix the holes in my story. So there are lots and lots of ways that you can practice this, pitch, polish, repeat method. I'm really excited. I'm going to show you the tech platform that we built for the pitch, polish, repeat part of the process. So I literally, I'm a writer. I got investors to give me money to build this cool platform, and I want to show it to you. Now, a bunch of you are probably on it already. You're participating in the forums. You're entering our fun contests, all that sort of stuff. But for some of you, you might not have seen this before. So I'm going to go through it really, really fast. Okay, so this is our discovery platform for writers. This is where writers come in, and the whole point of it is to swap feedback with one another. So if you write general fiction and genre fiction, if you write kid lit, if you write younger fiction, we're going to open a nonfiction section at some point, but it's not quite there yet. But the whole point is that you come in and you post sections of the story that you're working on, and you swap feedback with other writers. So, here's one called Same as It Never Was. And what's really, really cool about this is, you get the story as you'd expect. So she has posted chapter 1, or this is chapter 2 of her story. And you would expect there to be some narrative feedback. So, this is what I liked about it. This is what I didn't like about it. Well, that is definitely here. But what I also love is that we have these story scores with these aggregated ratings. So we're asking everybody to rank a story based on the voice, based on the character, based on the plot, based on the dialogue, based on the description. And what this does is it helps this writer see what the strengths and the weaknesses of this chapter are. So now this writer can go back and polish and then repost this, with a lot more focus on where the plot is headed. So it might be 2 lines, it might be a single paragraph that they need, but this aggregated story score is what's going to help them. And then, of course, you get the narrative feedback as well. That's kind of given them, some encouragement on what the writers see in it. So that's our platform that we built, and we're super duper excited about it. And part of my job at Ready Chapter 1 is I'm showing this platform to every single publisher that I can get FaceTime with. And the publishers are super duper excited about it because this is data on a level that they don't normally get. So, if people are submitting to them, just based on, hey, here's my story, what's your gut feeling about it? That's different from here's my story, and it achieved this level of story score. So it's got an average of a 4.7 story score. And so when I'm talking to publishers about it, we are actively trying to figure out ways to bridge between our forums and publishers who are looking to bring in new stories. So that's super exciting. We're offering these free contests, and we've pulled in a whole bunch of agents to judge our contests that are going on right now. So you can, come in and you can participate in a pitch contest. You can participate in a first pages contest. And if you're one of the top scoring stories, we're just going to take your story and we're going to forward it straight to these agents, and they're going to give you feedback on it. So it's a great way to get access to these agents. And we're also getting publishers to take notice. So I'm not going to say which publishers yet, but there will be ones that and we are trying to formalize, what these agreements could look like. But there's just a huge opportunity to take that like geeky data analytics applied to story and help find the next big thing, which my hope is it's that the next big thing is sitting in on this call right now. But that's where magic happens. So I've got Christy and Jake, who both went through our curriculum. And Christy, I'm not saying that our curriculum did the work for them, but Christy and Jake both used our curriculum. They used the tools in it, and they found success. Christy sold Celebrity Crush in a 2-book deal to Hachette. Super excited for her. She's been working really, really hard at this game and, has found success. Jake landed a literary agent maybe 6 months ago. It's been a little while longer, but, he's continuing to work on his craft. And, again, we're not claiming responsibility for their success, but maybe we helped give them the tools they needed to be successful. So that's super exciting. And that's like the vision of the company that we built, the company we're building, is to give writers all the tools that they need, 24/7 access, get that feedback that you need to create better stories, to fix your stories. The analytics were really like an add-on thing. Like as we were building this, we were like, oh, did you realize we could do this with it? And so we built in the analytics, and that's been one of the things that, people like the most about it. We've got the writing contests, connecting with fellow writers, got this list of gatekeepers that are, excited to access our top stories. And the ultimate goal is for our people to be able to know when their story is ready to send out to the world and ultimately break that rejection cycle.
The pitch for Ready Chapter 1 is really simple. We're a professional community of career-driven writers dedicated to helping each other level up as we write, polish, and pitch our stories. If that's where you're at on your journey, then there's a place for you here. Click the link below to see how you can join us.